Welcome back to another episode of Microdose with TheMoDose Cannabis. I'm Mo, and today we're going to cover lighting. So lighting is extremely important in our cannabis grow. It is literally plant food. So the way that I would a veggie coppable, or maybe you want Chick-fil-A or sirloin or whatever tickles your fancy, whatever you like to eat, that is how our plants feel about lighting. Okay, they can't get enough of it. There's a balance, but you know what I'm saying. So today we're going to talk about lighting schedules, and then we're going to talk about the types of lighting so you can figure out which kind works best for your grow setup. Let's go. Okay, so let's quickly touch, and I mean quickly, touch on the light schedule for autoflower plants. So once our autoflower seeds germinate, so that's a different process. We know we start with darkness. Once we turn our lights on, we are going to stay on an 18-6 schedule. So 18 hours of light, 6 hours of dark. And we're going to keep that schedule throughout the duration of the grow. So from seedling to veg to flower, we're going to keep it on 18-6. You don't have to change anything with the lighting. Why? Because they are autoflowers, so they go from each phase based on the time frame, not the light schedule. So that's pretty sweet, short and simple. Get your timer going and just leave it as is for the duration of the grow. So the light schedule for photoperiod plants, a little bit different. So once we germinate our plants, again, darkness, when we turn on our light schedule, we do start on an 18-6. So 18 hours of light, 6 hours of darkness. But we keep that only through veg. Once we are about to flip our plants to flower, we turn off our lights. Turn them off for 36 hours. Then we turn them on again for 12 hours of light on, 12 hours of darkness. Okay, so a 12-12 schedule. So germination, darkness. Once we turn on our light, 18-6, then another period of darkness for 36 hours before we flip to flower. Once we flip to flower, then we're on a 12-12 schedule. All right, so lighting spectrum. And again, this is a extremely microdose version of this. So when we're looking at our lighting spectrum, it starts over here on blue and then it ends over here on far red. Okay, and let's think about how our plants are growing and developing. When they are young seedlings and in veg, they need more blue light. As they get older, they can tolerate and need more light, and so they end when we're in flower with far red lighting. So our plants are growing with the spectrum, okay? And you don't really need to worry about this, because if you're using, LED or HID lighting, you're gonna probably have full spectrum lighting. So especially for me, I use LED lights. There's a switch that says veg and another one that says flower. So you don't really have to worry about it, but just at a high level, you should know that that's kind of how our plants are absorbing the lighting spectrum. Let's talk about lighting type. So let's start with fluorescent lights. Fluorescent lights are very inexpensive. They're also very low intensity, which is why they are really only good for, I don't want to say only because I don't want to discredit them, but they're good for seedlings. They're good for cloning. But outside of that, the light intensity is just too dull to use for any other stage of the cannabis grow. So seedlings, clones, yes, fluorescent. Veg and flower, you're not going to get anywhere with that. High intensity discharge or HID lights are creme de la creme. Okay, they have been the standard of lighting in the cannabis industry for many years. One drawback about them though is that they can get very hot, like they produce a lot of heat, but they also have really intense light, which is why they're so great for growing cannabis. HIDs are also more expensive than fluorescent, but they are also way cheaper than LED lights. Now, here's the thing, and I'll get into LEDs in a second. HIDs are lower cost up front, but you're going to have to switch out your bulbs pretty regularly. So the cost kind of balances out at the end of the day. But if you have concerns about upfront costs, HIDs might be something that you want to consider. So we have three types of bulbs that we want to use if you're using HIDs. The first is metal halide, so MH, and those produce a nice blue spectrum of lighting. So as I just mentioned, you would definitely use that during your veg phase. Then we have HPS. So HPS is high pressure sodium, and those produce more of a yellowish, reddish lighting, and so those would be used during the flowering stage. Then we have CMH, otherwise known as ceramic metal halide, which is a full spectrum lighting, and you can use that throughout the duration of the grow, so veg and flower. If you do use HIDs, I do recommend that you get one that is air cooled because, again, that heat that it produces can be pretty hot. I use LED grow lights or light emitting diodes, and they are perfect for my needs. If you tend to be in a hotter climate, you might want to look into using LEDs because they don't produce a lot of heat. Also, if you are really concerned about your electric bill getting too high, LEDs are probably the route you want to take. They do produce a nice intense light, but they use less wattage, so it's going to be a little bit kinder to your electricity bill. The one thing about LED lights, though, is that they can be more expensive on the front end, but hear me out. You don't have to replace the grow lights as often. You can get through, years using the same grow lights. Whereas with HIDs, as I mentioned, you would have to flip out those bulbs pretty regularly. So at the end of the day, they probably do balance out. It's just, do you want to invest in the short term or in the long term? And kind of, when you're looking at the electric bill differences, just ask yourself what's going to work best for you. Last little bit of a note on lighting. So there's like a general rule of thumb, like how many inches your lighting should be from your plant. Again, I have no problem with, just saying like, oh, you should have at least 24 inch, blah, blah, blah. But what the real lesson here is that you should look at what the recommended distance is based on what your grow light is recommending. So whatever your manufacturer is saying needs to be the distance for the intensity of your grow light, you should follow that. Why? Because all these grow lights are different. You could spend $100 on a grow light. You could spend $2,000 on a grow light, right? The intensity is going to be different. Therefore, the distance that you might need will be different as well. So I just highly recommend that you pay attention to what your manufacturer is saying for the distance during each stage. It's going to be different for seedlings versus veg versus flower. So also, please do monitor your grow light. So if you were to turn your light down too low, it might cause your plant to get very leggy because it's going to reach higher to get to that lighting, right? If you turn your light on too high, you might start to get light burn. It's not complicated, but keep that in mind. If you're trying to troubleshoot your plant and you're not really feeling like there's a nutrient deficiency based off of any of your diagnostics so far, you could very well just have your light too high for that phase. Now, you are going to have some browning on your leaves when they're in flower, and that's just because you are giving them a hell of nutrients and you are turning up that light high. But outside of that, and I'll show you what normal looks like versus like insane, but just kind of keep that in mind. You do have to pay attention to your lighting and what your plant is, responding to, how it's responding, and troubleshoot accordingly. On that note, let me know how it goes, which grow lights work best for you, but like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff, and I'll see you guys on the next episode.